We had a new open.
I love it.
So welcome to Untold Radio, everybody. So did you see that Tim and his wife Dana dropped Bigfoot Influencers
Yeah, the
show?
first episode.
Yeah, checked it out. Think about how scary that is. To just do a radio show. Think about that.
I have an idea.
Yeah. But I thought it was really, really amazing. They had a little, mic issues. I think, I look at that stuff and I go, oh, next one will be perfect. But they had Daniel Perez on, and Daniel has been in the Bigfoot, I guess, business, as we say, forever. Yeah, it was really cool. So anyhow, did you get my request on the
images?
the pareidolia thing that I want to talk about? And before we do that, we're going to have Jim Myers on from the Sasquatch Outpost. It's got a really cool story, which he kind of teased me on just a little bit in a text. But he's going to be on at like 7:15, and then we've got our guest Christopher O'Brien to talk about cattle mutilations, cattle disfigurations, basically a mystery that's been going on forever, long time. And we're going to get his opinion and hear about all his research. So anyhow, so a lot of us suffer from a thing called pareidolia. And I do too. I mean, everybody does. We've all seen faces on the, in the clouds, or, would be a common place, like in ceramic tile that's swirled, Yeah. When I was a kid growing up, my dad, your grandfather, did a really amazing painting. It was based on the Black Forest in Germany. And on purpose, he had hidden literally hundreds of subliminal, almost, messages, faces everywhere. And so me and your aunt would spend just a ton of time, trying to, look for faces. We never got tired of it. Never got tired. So we actually practiced it, when we were kids. But these were actually done in a way where he would put a face like in the tree bark, but my dad would purposely do it and make it go a little farther than the normal, 2 dots for an eye, a mouth. He would go a little further, but still would be very subtle, very hidden, very camouflaged. So we practiced that. So anyhow, why don't you go ahead and just pull the first picture up that I sent you?
So
they were kind of interesting.
Yeah, I got a collection of them.
It doesn't matter what order. Snap one. There we go. So if you see the face in this chocolate milk jug, then you have pareidolia. It's not something to be ashamed of. But what's really interesting about pareidolia is you can get it with audio. You can get it with health. You can, for instance, get a headache and think you're going to die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can kind of read into more things that are really going on. So it can be kind of a dangerous thing if we're not careful. But the greatest thing with me, of course, I know that that's not a person, that's a milk jug. Where you may have a problem is if you really do think that's a person, even after I've told you it's a milk jug.
Yeah. And I'm imagining there's people out there like that.
Well, yeah. I get so many images, probably at least one a week, where there's just some group of random objects that make up a face, and they think, well, maybe it's a creature. And then I'll, usually tell them, well, it could be, but chances are it's just, a set of random things that just make up a face, and you just think it may be a creature. So here is the actual definition. I'm going to read it. So here's the official definition. It says pareidolia is the tendency for perception to impose a meaningful interpretation on a nebulous stimulus, usually visual, so that one sees an object pattern or meaning where there is none. Common examples are perceived images of animal faces or objects in cloud formations, seeing faces in inanimate objects, or lunar pareidolia, like the man on the moon, which of course it's just random craters up on the moon. But I remember the first time my dad pointed out, "Oh, do you see the man on the moon?" And I'm like, "No, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "Look, and he's showing me, and all of a sudden I did see it. You can't unsee it, But it's just still random sized craters that just sort of make up a face. Have you seen that, Alex?
Yeah, it looks like a face.
Okay. So anyhow, but so these photos, let's see, this was put out. This actually was an ad, which is really interesting. And I wrote down it was called Big Global Travel. They put this out as one of those, ad articles disguised as an article, but it was really an ad.
An advertorial.
Advertorial, yeah. Of course, it's marked as ad, but I thought it was really good. And every once in a while, they'll actually get very creative and put out a really good one. I thought this one was excellent. So why are you showing us all of these? Click one. Let's scroll through them one at a time. There we go. A potato. But if you see the face right away, yep, that's what you're suffering from. What is that? An intercom?
Yeah. Like a mailbox, maybe.
Yep. I don't know. Mailbox, intercom. Light switches. That one wasn't so obvious to me. Yep.
Cloud, yeah.
See it right away. It's like somebody wearing earmuffs.
A loaf of bread.
Yeah. Yep. Of course, pretty obvious. It's a loaf of bread.
You see the eyes?
Yeah, sandwich. I thought it was pretty interesting that they even had this collection of photos.
And then there's like a face.
It's a shark, upside down shark. Yep.
Yeah, you can see the eyes.
Mm-hmm. Upside down shark.
Face, yeah.
Yep. And what in the world? I'm trying to figure out what the real object is. Oh, it's a bumper of a car and a taillight with a reflector.
That looks like a dog face.
Yeah. See, I've got ceramic tile, especially in one of our bathrooms, that it is kind of a smorgasbord of these kind of faces. It's just so many random faces. I mean, literally, you can be taking a shower and you go, "Oh, there's another one I haven't spotted." It's interesting. Holy crap, you have a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
Just click through. It doesn't matter. Can you just click through them without going back to the source? Probably not.
No, I can set it up a different way next time. But that's kind of spooky.
What is it, an upside down hat?
Yeah.
Air holes. Okay.
And you had a...
But I find it interesting that there's audio forms. So let's say you're vacuuming and you just think you hear something. You might hear your name called because your brain is putting together, basically this white noise into audio. So you may hear something that sounds like your name, but it's just the vacuum. It's just random noise.
Which is weird.
Yeah, super weird. So in Michigan, there was a rare white black bear photographed on a game cam. So it's kind of like, yeah, one for game cams. because hardly anything ever shows up on game cams. It's super interesting. It's very rare. Do you have that photo of this bear I sent you?
Yeah, I do.
So this is a white-faced black bear. Albino? Don't know. But there's a whole bunch of bears in British Columbia called the Kermode bears that are white. And so the article kind of went on to explain, where it may be a genetic connection between the bears in British Columbia and this bear. So it says a hunting guide set out bear bait in a trail camera in Michigan woods. But the beast that came wandering into view of the hidden lens was, even to a seasoned outdoorsman, stunning. Photos taken by the trail cam and shared on social media show a bear with a striking white fur. So I just thought it was amazing. Never seen or have ever talked to anybody that's ever seen a white-faced bear, in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin. Super rare.
I've never even seen a picture of one until you showed me this.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
So you had never heard of the spirit bear?
No, never.
Oh,
it's crazy to see. Yeah.
Yeah, the spirit bears are beautiful. If you ever get a chance, look at them. They're just, I don't know, they look friendly even, for some reason. Isn't it amazing how a white bear will look much more friendly and not as menacing? Do you get that feeling too, that if you ran into a bear that had white fur, that it wouldn't seem menacing?
Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just, dark we're just associating anything dark and black with evil.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Black ravens were considered, and crows were considered evil throughout history because of their color and the fact that they would feed on carrion and human bodies and those kinds of things. And that just kind of fed into the whole thing that's just programmed into us, that if you see a black animal, it's scarier. But if you ran into the friendly white bear, just because it's light colored, you would just think, oh, it's so cute.
Till it rips your arm off.
Same bear, yeah. And this is apparently a male bear, about 2 years old. So, anyhow. Do we have Jim?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Let's get Jim on. We got to hear this story. There he is, Jim Myers from the Sasquatch Outpost. How you doing, Jim?
Hey guys, good to be on the.
Whoa. Jim, give us a couple of words of chat. Okay? No, it's bad.
It's bad.
You sound like a robot.
Yeah, can you talk normal?
I can take it on earpods and put it on my computer if you want.
Oh no, not the AirPods again. Yeah, can you unplug your AirPods, Jim? You got to take your AirPods out.
Can.
Just unplug everything. They're not allowed on podcasts. They don't work ever. There you go. Oh. Just turn your phone into a regular phone, and then we'll turn you. Just pick up your phone if you're using your. Ooh, we're gonna have to disconnect him, Alex. Ooh, that was bad.
What was going on?
I have no idea. It sounded like he was in slow motion too.
Yeah, it must be some issue with the wireless driver.
We can try. We can get him on again. See if we can.
Yeah.
If he comes back. If.
So he had, was it some UFO stories?
Yeah, apparently he was out doing research, and there was some kind of UFO sighting. Don't know. Didn't want to hear the story. But man, it's not. We don't even need to hear this story. We got to hear Jim.
Well, hopefully we can get him back on. I'll send him a message on Messenger.
Yep.
What else has been new?
Not a whole lot. I mean, obviously, fall is here. It's cooling down. Today it was, I think, high in the 50s.
Yeah, it was cold today.
Yesterday was in the 80s, and of course, my air conditioner broke again. So I'm right back. Right. And so if it's going to break, I guess it's a good time of year to break.
Yeah.
It's just part of the fun of owning a older house as your house. You've got a brand new home, but as your house gets older, probably even at the 7-year mark, all of a sudden, furnace isn't on. You get up and you're taking a cold shower, because your thermostat of the hot water heater broke, or it's just a little irritating things that happen.
It's just one thing after another.
And I have apparently a leak in my air conditioning unit. They cannot find it. So because there's a tiny little leak, they want me to spend $10,000 and put in a new unit when it's just a little leak. Everything works great. Oh, well. So I'm either going to have to do get a how-to book and do it myself. It's probably what I'm going to have to do. And also let me know when our guest comes on, Alex.
Okay, absolutely. You should be on in about 10 minutes.
Okay. See if we can get Jim back on. I can text him too. Yeah, it's like, what is it with AirPods that causes this bizarre feedback?
Well, it's like, already we got to do this live over the internet, and then the wireless speaker, the wireless headphones have to connect to the computer. All right, so here, let's try. Looks like he jumped on again.
Okay.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, I'm on my phone. Is that better?
Yes. What in the world were you on? Were you on another planet?
I was on my laptop with Bluetooth to my earpods. So AirPods.
Oh yeah, you can't do that. Yeah, doesn't work. We've had other people try it, and it's a bomb.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad it worked a little bit.
So if you can steady your phone, you're making us sick. Every week you come on, Jim, you make us ill. You got to put that phone down. There you go. Just find a spot. No, we don't want to see your ceiling, Jim. We want to see you. Is there a spot?
There you go.
Okay. Well, we see your light in your ceiling, but go ahead, Jim. Tell us your story.
So I was taking a group out for one of our horseback expeditions, and we were about 30 miles from the nearest town that I can remember. And we were sitting around the fire one evening, and we were talking, and we got to talking about UFOs. Just comes up, and one of the guys is looking up in the sky, and he goes, "You mean like that one?" And he points up at this light in the sky above us, and at the naked eye, it was bright. You could definitely tell it was something in the air. It was not a star. It was about 6 in the evening, still very light. So we got out our binoculars, and the other guy had a spotting scope, and we zoomed in, and then we couldn't get a shot of it with the scope or binoculars. So I did an artistic rendition of what I saw through my binoculars. So if you can pop that up, Alex. Yeah. So it had lights underneath. They weren't the lights weren't moving. If I was seeing the underneath, I don't know what I was seeing, which part of this craft I was seeing, but it sat there without moving for about an hour. We all watched it. And then as the sun started to set, the colors on this craft, whatever it was, started to change. Maybe it was reflecting from the sun behind us in the west. But then it hadn't moved up to this point. It started to move slowly to our right and then just disappeared. And I wished I didn't think of this till the next day. I had a drone with me. I could have sent my drone up as high as I could get it and try and get a shot of that thing with the 4K camera and see what I could have gotten, and didn't even think of it till too late.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Put the actual photo up, Alex. Can you blow that up even? Is there a way that you can start zooming in on that photo?
I'll blow it up as much as I can.
Yeah, let's take a look at it.
So
Super, it is interesting. And of course,
while he's doing that, I took some blue objects like we talked about, Doug.
Oh, yeah.
And I put them out. It just looks like a fuzzy, bright object to the naked eye. You can't see definition.
Yeah.
So we were trying to figure out how high this was. I could get a really clear picture on my binoculars of the image of the
Can
craft.
you blow it up more, Alex? Have you even tried?
That's as big as I can get it.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of from a distance it looks amorphous. You can't see, but it's when you got it on binoculars, it was a clear, defined oval shape. It was.
Oh, okay. For sure, it was oval.
It was definitely
there you go.
oval,
there you go.
And it had two kind of half semicircle lights opposite one another underneath it, and it just sat there. And again, there's nothing out there. I mean, there were a few bow hunters who were out there with us, and there was nobody else out there. So I don't know if it was watching us or what it was watching. So it was interesting. That was the first UFO visitation I've seen on one of these trips.
Ever? I mean, is the first UFO you've ever encountered?
that I could say was a UFO. Yeah. Where I could see enough definition when I could zoom in that I thought, man, that's a craft of some kind sitting up there.
Yeah, so, it's always really amazing when you can have a daylight sighting. Yeah. The fact it was sitting there is my only concern. That it wasn't the moon.
No, absolutely
sure. Okay,
absolutely sure. And it stayed. It's up. Let's guess 3,000 feet in the air, and it stayed in the same spot for over an hour, which meant it had to be moving with the Earth's rotation slightly to stay in the exact same spot.
Okay.
And so it didn't move. It didn't change. There was no exhaust. There was nothing. It just sat there. And I just was watching it thinking, what kind of technology do you have to sit in one spot in the sky, not drop, not move, just sit there? It was crazy.
So okay, let's switch gears. You said you obviously went up there for research.
Yeah, I went up there for research.
Anything happen?
Well, the first night, we go out one night early to put up the camp. Then that night we had a huge gale blowing through. We had to tie our tents to our trucks to keep them from blowing away. And then it stopped. Like 10 o'clock, the wind stopped completely. And as soon as it stopped, me and one of the other people in our camp, there were three of us, heard the loudest growl I've ever heard. Deep, long growl, real close to the camp. And we're all like, what was that? And we looked, there was nothing outside that we could see. And we didn't have the horses with us that night. Thankfully, they would have taken off with the windstorm. But so don't know what that was. We could hear something walking around camp, kicking stuff that we had on the ground, just equipment and stuff, but never could see anything. The next 3 nights actually, I put out a shiny plastic blue plate and a shiny blue jug. I think I sent that picture of them to Alex. And the first night, nothing was disturbed. The second night, we moved them further into the woods and put some like Reese's cup and other stuff on there, granola bar. All the food was gone. The plate looked like it had some smears on it, and I've got them in a plastic Ziploc bags. If you want me to send them to you and take a look.
Okay, all right. So can you show us the objects, Alex, if you have a phone?
Yeah. Let me just. It was.
Is that
get it to the right.
Some kind of jug?
It was a water bottle,
Oh, okay.
and I cleaned both of them off and then used gloves when I put them out.
When
So
you say a water bottle, are you talking about like a water cup?
no, it's like a one you carry on your belt or something.
Okay.
See if the picture comes up. There you go. So that's kind of sideways. That should be turned 90 degrees counterclockwise.
Okay, I got
Those
you.
are
Now.
up on
So that's a
on some
painted.
logs. No, they're not painted. They're both manufacturer blue, shiny. The plate is sitting on two logs up about 7 feet in the air, and the water bottle is lying down next to it. So I don't know why they turned out sideways. That's bizarre. But we put 3 marshmallows on them the last night, and whatever it was that took them seemed like it may have stood next to the tree and reached up there and just plucked them off of the plate, because the plate wasn't moved at all. If it had been a little raccoon or something climbing up there, I think it would have knocked everything over. So I kept that stuff. There you go. I kept it from being touched by my hands, and put them in Ziploc bags when we left. And I don't know if there's any prints on them or not. I couldn't tell from looking at them. We had some Velcro on there for hair. I didn't see any hair captured.
Yeah, though usually the prints are extremely obvious.
Are they?
They're very white. Yep.
Okay. So that was the first try at that, and I'll keep trying that when we go out in the future with different blue objects to see what they do with them.
Great. Do we have Christopher in the green room yet, Alex?
Just waiting for him to come in. I'm gonna just send him a quick message and see where he's at.
We're having live fun tonight.
So
what else happened? What else happened?
So we had nothing much happened at night. We had some adventures with the horses. We had it was an international group. We had a French couple, a British guy who flew over from Britain just for this, and a guy drove over from California. And the French guy, we were trying to cross a stream. He was the first one to try, and his horse went up to its belly. He was on the biggest horse we have. It went right up to its belly in mud, and he dove off, and the horse managed to get out. And then we tried to cross somewhere else, and the British guy was crossing ahead of his horse, with the lead rope. The horse decided it was ready to cross, and it jumped across and body slammed this poor guy and knocked him flying into a bush. So nobody was hurt, thankfully. It was some excitement, but we did see some eye shine. The second night we were out, we saw some eye shine. I couldn't get it on video because it was too far off, but it was multiple red and yellow and white changing in and out from there was more than one set of eyes that we could see. So yeah, so it was a fun trip. And it's always good when you get out and get back and nobody's gotten hurt and everyone had a good time. So
yeah, were they satisfied that they had a great trip?
They were, and I took them all out for a night hike. We had 2 back-to-back groups that we took out, and I took them out, each group out on a night hike, which they really enjoyed and were creeped about.
Cool.
And so, but no vocals this time. It was unusually quiet compared to other trips we've taken.
Interesting.
So Christopher did get back to me. He should be on any minute now.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to Christopher.
Pardon?
I'm looking forward to hearing Christopher.
Oh, yeah. No, he should be amazing. He's been doing it a long time. Research, and
yes, he has.
I think he's, I think he may have some other experiences with cryptids too. I don't know.
I think he's done some research here in Colorado in the I'm trying to remember the name of that valley. That's the highest percentage of UFO activity in the country.
San
Wow.
Luis.
San Luis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, I will sign off and let Chris sign on. And
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
let me
Thanks,
tell
Jim, for coming on.
You bet.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Bye.
There you go. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I would it just, to me, it looked like the moon, but you have to go on what they're telling you. I wasn't there, but the photo looks like the moon.
So we are still waiting for Christopher. I did have footage that Jim sent. I don't know if this was when he was camping. It's I think you can kind of hear like a roar. I could put it on while we're waiting for him.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me pull it up. So I don't think you can hear anything at first, but I think if you cut in.
Did you listen to it?
Yeah, I heard a bit of it. Here we go.
Okay, back it up now. Okay, let it play. I think the part we're listening for is the part that made the dogs go crazy.
Go back further.
Yeah, let's go back further one more time, and then we'll let it play through.
Okay, and then as soon as we're done with this, Christopher's in the back room.
Oh, okay, great. Is it playing?
Yeah, it's weird. Like you can't hear any audio until about that part. It's just dead quiet. So I don't know if he was able to talk a little bit about this while I was.
No, he
trying to
didn't.
get stuff straightened out.
No. Oh well. Yeah, it sounded kind of this metallic-y horn sound that I've heard many, many times.
Interesting.
Yeah, in association with Bigfoot. Who knows?
Yeah.
But David Ellis has collected quite a few of those recordings.
Okay. Well, maybe we could have him on. Next time he's on, he can talk a little bit about what exactly that was about.
Yeah, I have no idea. All right.
In the meantime, hey, Christopher. How's it going tonight?
Good.
So it looks like you've been studying cattle mutilations and researching this topic for a very long time.
Yeah, well, it's my least favorite thing to do, but yeah, but go figure. The ancient mariner had an albatross, a dead albatross around his neck. I got a dead cow.
So, hi, Christopher. So, why is it your least favorite thing to do? And I can only imagine trying to investigate a carcass. That would.
Well, yeah, exactly. I lived in the high desert, and most of these cases happen in the spring, summer, and early fall, and they decompose pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And they smell really bad. I almost lost my relationship, if you can believe it. She wouldn't let me come in. I had to get all hosed off out in the yard, and I had to keep my clothes outside because I smelled so bad. The cadaverine, the molecule that makes dead bodies smell bad.
Well, can you go ahead, Christopher? And there are people that still don't know what cattle mutilation consists of. What are some of the most common things that you find that would put it in that category?
Well, I guess a classic mutilation could be defined as a head of livestock that's found, discovered dead, with no real obvious cause of death, and oftentimes there's no thrash marks from where, when an animal dies, it kind of, it's going to be flailing around, struggling, and very few of these cases show evidence of the animal struggling, and it's found by their owner missing various soft tissue organs like the tongue gone from deep within the throat. Often the mandible flesh will be excised and taken away. You could put your hand in and they do plugs out of the rear end of cows and pull the whole reproductive tract out like a plug. Genitalia is missing, often an ear or an eye, sometimes a circular, or even we've had perfect squares and triangles of hide taken off the animal. You can't. There's no apparent reason why you would do that. Obviously, the soft tissue organs are the organs that scavengers are going to go through to get into the body and into the viscera. So there's a plausible deniability factor, because a lot of these cases are misidentified scavenger action, and that out of 200 cases that I had personally investigated, I'd say 40 were the real deal, and out of those, 8 were beyond anyone's ability to explain.
Okay, so let's talk about the 8. What made, let's just pick one. What made it so amazing that, it just isn't normal?
Well, it was found after a pristine 5-inch snowfall.
Okay.
There was only one drop of blood found. It was on the rear left hoof. There was no tracks. There was no evidence at all how the calf had died. It was only about a month old, I think, maybe even 3 weeks. And the rancher pulled it into his heated garage. It's the first week of March at 8,000 feet in Colorado. So it was still pretty cold out, and that enabled the carcass to stay fresh. And even in the heated garage, he noticed that it wouldn't decay. It was missing its right front leg. It was missing its brain with no break into the cranium. And the dura, the film membrane around the brain, between the brain and the skull, was perfectly intact. It's inconceivable how anyone could get, or anything could get the brain out without damaging the dura, because it's very, very thin. It's a membrane. And
Yeah, I've actually heard it's so thin. There was a woman that's trying to sue because she had the COVID test and it punctured her dura through the nasal cavity,
right,
just with a swab. So
Yeah.
so that gives you an idea how delicate.
Yeah, well, it was missing its spine from its base of its neck down to its hips, and the spine had been taken out in an upwards motion. We could tell because of the way the discs at the top and the bottom of the spine were dislodged, like it had been taken out upwards. But that's impossible because there was the hide there. And the liver and heart, the two most delectable organs that any scavenger would immediately go after, they had been surgically excised, and they were laid down like presentation style in the body cavity. And it had a faint smell of like some sort of medicinal musky perfume, maybe a little antiseptic quality to it. It was astringent but it was also very musky and it was almost like a medicine incense or something, which I found that to be a little disturbing. And of course, the local sheriff, that the night of this incident, they received two reports, one from a neighbor to the rancher, and one from somebody on the state highway about a half a mile away, was traveling down the state highway and saw weird lights wheeling around approximately where the case took place. And then somebody else called the sheriff and said, there's some strange lights out in my neighbor's pasture. And the sheriff went out to check it out and didn't see anything. It was like 3 in the morning, I think. But that case, that was one of two that I sent to the New York State Veterinary College at Cornell, Dr. John King. He was my skeptic, who's who veteran, what do they call him? He's a pathologist, basically.
Okay.
And he kind of wrote the textbook on veterinary pathology. And all the cases I sent him, he said, well, it could be this, it could be that. I don't see anything here that looks unusual. But in this case, and then one other, he said, I can't tell you how that happened. He said, it's just really, it's very puzzling. And of course, I videotaped the whole scene and did extensive photographs and, tried to, investigate the case, but professionally. Treated the scene like a crime scene, and
Yeah. So you've come to no doubt conclusions on either the whole dang mystery or you've got several possibilities.
Yeah.
Do you want to, let's just cut to the chase, and before we even go on, it would be kind of cool to know where do you stand? Could they be off-world, creatures that are coming here and doing this kind of surgery?
I think
Is
that's
it
the least
human?
likely.
Is it government?
I think that's the least likely.
Okay. But possible.
Yeah, sure, it's possible. You can't
Okay.
factor it out. You can't factor it in.
Right.
Some investigators say that that's it exclusively, that they're responsible for all these, but
Gotcha.
the evidence points to a number of different human groups with their own particular agenda. And one of the agendas may concern the beef industry and their absolute terror and fear of prion disease breaking out in the food chain. Prions and mad cow disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease in humans, same thing.
Right.
Is horrific. And
Well, isn't it true a prion cannot even be cooked away and,
it
made
can't.
ineffective?
No. People say it's the smallest life form that we know. It's 1,000 times smaller than the smallest virus. But basically, it's just a protein molecule that misfolds, and it causes other proteins to misfold. And so if you look at what's the definition of life? That it replicates and you can kill it. Prions only go about half the way there. You can't kill them. You can turn them off. It takes over 2,500 degrees.
Jeez.
I think pure chlorine will render them inert, but who's going to be mainlining Clorox? It's just
It's scary.
It's horrendous, and it's called Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease in humans,
Yeah.
chronic wasting disease in deer and elk, and that's where it was first detected in nature. That and scrapie, which is a nasty disease, prion disease in sheep, and they were the first ones to develop it actually, and it's really scary. I mean, beef cattle are the largest income producing sector of agriculture. I think it's all the rest of agriculture combined is about worth what the beef industry is, and it's, you know, that's why I wrote Stalking the Herd. It's a 600-page book because it really gets complicated.
No, and I realize it is a complicated topic.
Yeah.
And we do plan on having you back because it's so complicated. And hopefully we can, we can just kind of dive a little deeper
No.
into fewer topics versus trying to skim over it.
Yeah.
I think you might even enjoy that better.
Yeah.
So let's keep talking about this prions before we go further. Have people died from this disease?
Oh yeah.
Is it common? Is it?
20-year. This guy in England was a vegetarian for 20 years, and he died of it.
Okay.
So, some genetic types, it could take up to 40 years for it to. It's like AIDS and HIV. Once it becomes virulent and it starts misfolding the proteins, it can lay dormant up to 35, 40 years.
40
And
years.
most people are going to fall into that particular gene type, or the ones that will get it within 8 years of being infected. And then there's a small percentage of people that die in months.
Does this only affect the brain? It's so if you get it,
nerve tissue.
so in
yeah.
any nerve tissue. Okay.
Yeah, nerve tissue, and especially in the brain. Basically, it's similar to Alzheimer's and dementia, but kind of on steroids. In fact, we've seen a dramatic increase in dementia deaths in this country, way more than statistically is probable. I think we're up around 5,000 times increase in dementia deaths. It's horrible because as it slowly eats away and misfolds proteins in your brain, it interrupts synaptic pathways. You start to twitch out. You can't think straight, and then eventually your body forgets how to tell itself to breathe.
Okay.
And so you die. Generally, you're going to die from pneumonia or some sort of pulmonary type disease.
So how is this spread to humans?
By eating infected meat. Most cases, I think, are being produced by hunters who are not being diligent and getting their deer or elk checked for prion disease, which in several states you have to have it checked. It's the law now. But for a long time, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the upper Midwest, and New York, other parts of the New England area, people were eating the infected meat and causing these proteins to start misfolding. So in England they had a 10-year epidemic of it, and they ended up having to kill every single head of cattle in the British Isles.
And this is the same thing called mad cow disease, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. So where I interrupted you when we got off on the prion was you were just saying, different groups that may have an interest in doing these mutilations. And I know you like to use a different word than mutilations. What's the word you like to use? Because it is a horrible word.
I just call them unexplained animal deaths. I mean,
okay, unexplained animal deaths.
Yeah.
But so where I get confused, and I've done enough research. I did a 1-hour show on it for History Channel. I think I did a pretty good job, and I focused on trying to duplicate some of the cuts and some of the procedures that were used to remove these organs. Now we failed. I mean, we had some surgeons that really knew what they were doing.
Right.
So if it's humans, what in the world and what would they have access to?
you know, it's really apparent to me and several other investigator researchers that it's pretty obvious that it's not the cow, a particular animal, that's being targeted. It's where that animal is in the environment, and they're testing the environment, not the animal. The animal has vestiges of its environment in the fastest regenerating tissues in the body, which are the tongue, the genitalia, the reproductive organs. The soft tissue organs regenerate faster than any of the other parts of the animal. So some people say you can divine for heavy metals and oil by examining the tongue and the
Okay.
glands. They seem to occur downwind and downstream of anywhere we use uranium or plutonium, weapons enrichment labs, missile fields, uranium mines, power plants. If you go downwind and downstream, that's the heaviest concentration of cases. And right after Fukushima happened, I predicted that we would have cases in Oregon and Northern California where the radiation plume went. And Washington, Oregon, and California, it really didn't have that many cases. It's pretty much a east of the Rockies phenomenon. There have been cases, Nevada, Utah, Washington, Oregon, California, but they're very few and far between relative to Kansas, Colorado, Missouri, Nebraska. Those are the real hard-hit states, Colorado, New Mexico, because they were downwind of the Nevada test site. So I told David Perkins, I said, look, if he's the one that came up with the idea that radiation has something to do with these cases, residual environmental pollutants, radioactive pollutants. And I said, if your theory is correct, then we should start to see cases in Oregon and maybe Northern California, because that's where the big plume of radioactivity went 4 days after Fukushima. And sure enough, we've had 21 cases in Oregon in the past 5 years. So maybe there's something to that particular scenario that somebody is very interested in how above ground radiation is impacting livestock and getting into the food chain. So, and plus you have big, super large ranching concerns that are trying to buy out their neighbors, and if the neighbors don't want to sell, I think in a few instances we're seeing big ranching concerns using mutilations as a terror tactic to drive people out of business so they can obtain their property.
That's the Scooby-Doo tactic.
Well, I've got 3 county sheriffs that publicly stated they know a rancher that did that.
That's crazy. But how could they duplicate a good, I like to use the word mutilation because it still explains all these strange surgical procedures.
Right.
So did they try to duplicate mutilation, or did they succeed in duplicating it?
I mean, one rancher, Emilio Lobato, lost 49 head in 2 weeks. They were shot, stolen, disappeared, or were found mutilated.
It's $100,000 in cows.
It took him 30 years to recover from.
Wow.
And he was right next door to the Taylor Ranch. It's huge. It was the only commons in the United States beside the Boston Common. And, all the county citizens, 98% Hispanic, would go up there to get firewood and hunt and camp and stuff. And it belonged to everybody. It was a common ground for everybody. And he came in 62 and was able to wrangle through some sleight of hand thing and paying off the right people. He was able to wrangle private ownership of the commons, and he had a running war going with his neighbors for 25 years. So, if you look at the hardest hit areas, Weld County, Elbert, um, you know, Perkins and Adams County, 70 to 80% of the small mom and pop ranches, which is 500 head or less, are gone. And instead, there's large ranching concerns that are consolidating cattle into huge super feedlots. And it's just horrific conditions. They have to pump them full of antibiotics because they're standing around in their own feces and urine. They feed them, pump them full of grain so that they'll put on weight quickly. They do everything they can to get them out of there as quick as they can. And 80% of the antibiotics used in this country go into cattle. Most people don't know that. And they use growth hormones and everything. And we don't have any cases, mutilation cases, not one case, from a feedlot.
That's interesting. See, that's a fact I've never heard before. That's super interesting.
We also I have looked and looked and looked for years for a single case of the sacred white cow of India, the Brahma, which there's millions of Brahmas all over the world, and many in this country. In fact, they're highly prized as bucking cattle. Your best. Sure,
at the rodeos.
Yeah, your best rodeo bulls have Brahma in them, and I cannot find a single case in thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that I've researched. Not one Brahma. I find that very intriguing. Mm-hmm. Also, this has only happened in Christian countries. It's another interesting.
These are all odd. These are all very odd facts.
Yeah. It's like a collective unconscious cultural stigmata.
Yeah.
Is how David Perkins and I look at it.
Yeah, it is weird. I do like your environmental theory, and it's certainly one that I've had. It just kind of makes sense, because if you want to just get cows and cow flesh, well, you can go to Walmart. You don't need to go into the field. But if you're testing...
The government has its own herds, and in some places, they, depending on the kind of information they're looking for, they'll rent pasture, they'll put their animals out there. The EPA did a study in the San Luis Valley downriver from a Superfund site that was a botched cyanide leaching field up at the Summitville goldfields, and it trashed the upper 17 miles of the Alamosa River. So if you go down about 40 miles from Summitville, it comes out into the valley, and right there is where the EPA rented some pasture and then had various types of livestock out there for 3 months, eating and drinking the water and eating and foraging right there. And then at the end of the 90 days, the scientist Brian Rimmer, he took them and did workups of their organs. He mutilated them basically, for the EPA, and he discovered hundreds of times the amount of heavy metals that way past what you should be able to get away with eating. And he said some of the animals, it was amazing to him that they were even alive. And when he went to his superiors, his bosses, and told them this, he said, "Well, when do you want me to write the press release?" And they said, "What? What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we got to warn people. There's people, the Alamosa River comes down, then it goes off into the Empire Canal and all these canals and feeder irrigation feeding with pipes and everything." And he said, "No, we're not going to tell anybody anything. You want us to create a panic?" And he said, "What do you mean you're not going to tell anybody?" And he quit in protest and went to Westward Magazine in Denver and did a whistleblower expose. And I find it interesting that the 2 years that he was there on the Alamosa River, but further, upstream, I had 7 mutilation cases on the Alamosa River or the Empire Canal. So, and those had nothing to do with the EPA and
Right.
stuff. They were the real deal.
But why the surgical precision? Why?
That's just a misnomer. You know, I keep beating people over the head, newcomers to the field, that want to go out there and you know, smell the cow. I keep telling them, you got to look for cut hair follicles, because that's the only way that you're going to, with a visual examination of the animal, that's the only way you're going to, without any shadow of a doubt, prove that something did, with intelligence and a sharp implement, did that to the cow.
Okay.
And I keep telling people, look for cut hair follicles. That's why I like cases in the early spring, because they haven't lost their winter coats and the hair's longer, and it's much easier to spot it. But nothing in nature can cut hair in a straight line.
Right. And in hair, once it's cut, it stays blunt.
Yeah.
Have you personally found cattle that have had their hair cut?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have videotaped and I've blown up
Okay.
pictures.
So
and
for
shows.
sure, you know those were done with instruments.
Yeah.
At least you know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 100%.
And that's the vast majority of the 40 cases that I had. Only 2 came back with the results of some sort of high heat lasing equipment was used. All the rest were done with a sharp implement, like a scalpel or a really super sharp buck knife, or you know, I mean, you'd be surprised. I've had ranchers who are taxidermists that tell me, yeah, that's not that big of a deal. I could do that, you know. But the hardest one is getting the tongue out of the throat. That's a tough one. You have to have some sort of device to open the jaws.
So you would think that if they were after the tongue, they wouldn't need the entire tongue, and they wouldn't need it removed the way it's been removed. So what are your thoughts on that?
The entire tongue isn't always gone. Sometimes a slice off the end of the tongue is gone. Sometimes just the surface part of the tongue is gone. The real high strange ones tend to have the entire tongue gone, and the glands too, because that's another thing that people forget to mention, is that they're after glands as well, and those glands in the throat area are taken with the tongue oftentimes. And
Are they taken from the outside or the inside? Are they
go right through the mouth. We've had a few that both the mandible, sides of the mandible, have been exposed, and they've peeled the skin back, cut it off, and then taken the tongue out from down here. It's not very common, but there have been cases like that.
Have you investigated any wild animal mutilation cases?
Yeah.
Same thing?
There's a buffalo at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo inside a cage that was right at the base of Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD has its underground facility. I mean, it was one of the most surveilled, pieces of earth on the planet. And they came down and mutilated a buffalo at the zoo that's right around the corner from the entrance. And then 3 or 4 months later, a cow was found right at the doorstep of NORAD. So, but in answer to your question, I've had deer, elk, pigs, goats, sheep, horses. I had a coyote that was mutilated along with a cow. They were lying right next to each other.
So maybe the coyote came to feed on the cow, and then how did that work? I mean, how do you catch a wild coyote to mutilate it?
I don't know.
It's so strange.
I don't know.
Are there certain cases that you think may be extraterrestrial? Because they would obviously have an interest in our environment too.
There are cases that are high strange that can't be explained by medical science.
Right.
They usually occur at the beginning of a wave. They're generally the precursor cases. And then it seems like other groups find out that there's interest by the paranormal perpetrators, and so they come in and they start doing mutilations, and then do red herring mutilations to take the onus and put it onto one of the other groups. It's very complicated.
It sounds like it.
So Christopher, so do you think that it is multiple groups
Yeah,
doing this?
It's the only way. It's the only logical explanation.
Is that there is no explanation. It's a number of them.
Yeah, it's multiple groups, and they even try to hide their agenda by doing cases that they don't need to do, and they're sloppier, they're more quickly done, they're not as pristine and surgical. Most of the cases are like that. They're, it could be scavenger action, or they could be mutilations. It depends on who finds it, how long it's been there. If you don't get there, during the summer months or the warmer months, if you don't get there within 24 hours, and all bets are off. I mean, and plus, I went 2.5 hours to one case. The wife of the rancher called me and said, we had one. Please come down.
Mm-hmm.
My husband said, yeah, we should talk to you. 2.5 hours. It's 100, I don't know, almost 200 miles. I get down there and I knock on the door, and she goes, oh, it's right there next to the house in the corral. And so I went there. All I saw was drag marks and back tractor tracks. Her husband had found out that I was on my way, and he took the damn thing and dug a hole and buried it before I got there, and then refused to, went out and hid in the back 40 so he didn't have to talk to me.
Why? For what reason?
He was scared shitless.
You didn't want to know what you had to say?
He was terrified.
Mm.
I mean, he's down south in the Hispano parts of the valley, north of Taos, and on the other side, on the western side of the valley, in Pawtucket and Los Tablas, and these little penitente communities and stuff. They have a culture unto themselves, and they're extremely superstitious, and very wary of ancient brujo and bruja magic that has been circulating all the way through there.
Sure.
Since the conquistadors were there and begat their, there's orange-haired, blue-eyed Hispanics in the San Luis Valley who are direct descendants of Spanish conquistadors.
So, are there more male cows? Does this happen to?
No, it's generally more females.
Or females.
Yeah. Although the Oregon cases, the first case that happened was 5 bulls from a single herd, and that was unusual. I don't think I've ever heard of that many bulls taken from a single herd in a single event. I mean, the guy, the amount of money he lost was, because those bulls, each one could probably sire 25 calves a year. Times that by 5, and then times that by 7 years.
So what would you guess the ratio is, males to females?
Probably 3 or 4 to 1.
Okay, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit. I want to go back to the brain again. By the way, you were also featured in a new documentary on Fox Nation, is it?
Yeah.
And how do you think the documentary came out? Did you like what you saw, or did you?
Yeah, I think they did a good job.
Okay.
I feel that they treated me and my 30 years of hard work with respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's an apolitical subject. I can't stand Tucker Carlson. I think he is a smarmy ass, showboating frat boy. I really don't like him at all. I don't like his politics. but this is an apolitical subject, and I felt that if I was going to be the very first person to ever be featured on an international or national news program, which, believe it or not, that was the first time a national news program did a feature on the story. It was going to go out to a lot of ranchers and
Sure.
farmers
Yeah.
who tend to be, rural conservatives, and they watch Fox, and so I felt that it was a really good way to get the word out. And,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and inform people, and I'm really fortunate that I haven't had the backlash from, people like myself who just can't stand Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to get into that because no
Yeah.
matter, you can't win talking politics because all
No.
you're doing is making half the world mad at you.
I know.
So let's avoid that. I wanted to get back to the brain. I know it's really gross, but have you found cases where the skull, where they've gone in from the outside and, sucked the brains out or just taken a partial part of the brain?
Yeah. The very first widely publicized case, Snippy the horse,
Oh, okay.
had the brain was taken out with no break in the cranium. So
Did they suspect how it was removed at all? Do you suspect how it was removed?
and they couldn't figure out how they got the lungs and the heart out without going through the rib cage.
Yeah, that's was that the first case or just the
No.
first
The
publicized?
first widely publicized case.
Okay.
The earliest cases I could find were in 1606 in England during the early days of the reign of James I. There were hundreds and hundreds of sheep that were mutilated around London.
Now that's interesting because certainly it would be doubtful there would be humans doing scientific research back in that century.
Well, the entry, the last line of the entry is very interesting because it says, "Of this sundry conjectures, but most would agreeth that it tendeth toward fireworks." Now, that always puzzled me, so I started doing some research and found out that sheep tallow is a main ingredient for fireworks. And that's what was missing, the towel and the tallow and some inward parts is how they put it, but the flesh and the wool left behind.
So it could have been a raid on those sheep just to get a certain organ or a certain.
Well, tallow, the fat.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So it could have been a raid of.
Yeah, but it's hundreds and hundreds of sheep, illegally being slain.
So what do you think did those mutilations back
I
then?
don't know. I think they're the same possible parties that ancient man, was aware of and began the practice of ritual blood sacrifice. They would sacrifice the older and less desirable animals with the hope that the gods wouldn't come down and take the best breeding stock. So I think that we still every day in this country, over 1 million people sacrifice animals to particular god forms that they believe in their beliefs, whether it's Candomblé, Santeria, Voodoo. There's a ton of people practicing those blood sacrifices, and if there is a cause for ritual blood sacrifice of animals by humans, I think that may somehow tie into the mutilation phenomenon. I'm pretty convinced that there's some sort of link there.
So have you had scientists or people who study the cuts? Have you had anybody say, "Geez, that's so precision. We don't have any even scalpel that can make that kind of cut, or a laser that can do that"? Have you confirmed that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. People and pathologists are pretty circumspect, and they don't. they're not going to venture too far out.
They're not going to commit to a.
Yeah. It's. I mean, they're looking for anything that they can find that would be
Right.
able to explain it away. But yeah, I bet that calf, that Del Norte calf, was no way that was done by an animal. There's just no way. Animals, coyotes have bad breath, but not bad enough to melt cut hair in a straight line.
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah, you just kind of wonder all of the different reasons and all of the different things. So what about environmental changes? I would imagine that's something you're keen on looking for: footprints, changes on plants, weird substances, God knows, trace evidence, human hair,
yeah.
whatever. I would
Yeah.
imagine you're just looking at everything.
Well, I've been
What have you
involved
found?
in a couple of studies. In fact, the one case that I did, that a real popular BBC television show actually filmed my investigation. And as it turns out, there was an extreme anomaly with the amount of magnetite that was found around the animal. It was, I forget, 300 or 400 times control samples.
What is magnetite?
It's the small 1 micron to 20 micron particles of iron, meteoritic dust. Most of it's from meteorites, but it's all over the face of the earth. And
Is there, in other words, if I went in my backyard, would I be able to find?
sure,
I would.
yeah,
Okay.
just drag a magnet.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, just drag
Interesting.
a magnet. I take a magnet with me and drag the site and see if I have an increased or a heightened level of magnetite. And in this particular case, at the body, it was 300 times the magnetite, and then it started to go down at about 25, 30 feet. And by the time it got to 50 feet, it was back to control levels, now, which were a mile away. So
what are your theories on why?
Well, and there was some really strange evidence along with that. The magnetite closest to the body had been melted, but usually when you melt metal, it flattens out, right?
Right.
These pieces of melted magnetite were spherical, like they'd been melted in a negative gravity environment. So.
Well, that doesn't sound very earthly.
Well, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
The jury is still out.
What I like about you, Christopher, and what I really respect about you is you really do. You have a very open mind, but yet you have a major BS meter.
Oh yeah.
Like major. I can just look in your eyes and go, "Oh, dude, this guy has got a meter that's."
I helped build the BS meter factory.
Yeah, I think you helped build it. But that's good though when you couple it with an open mind.
Yeah.
That's what's such a rare combination.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
it
take
really
that
is.
as
I
a
do compliment you.
Supreme compliment.
Well,
I
because
just hate to be, people say, "Oh, you're a ufologist," and it's like, God, no, don't call me one of those.
no, but yet you are very open,
Yeah.
obviously, to alien life visiting us.
Sure.
Yeah,
I've seen them. I'm an experienced.
Yeah, that's exactly. So you're not
Yeah.
you're not one of these skeptics with no reasons why you're a skeptic. You just
Well,
I can just tell though, you're no
to me,
bullshit
it's-
getting past you.
It's common sense. I mean, there are some investigators that say the aliens are coming and gathering cattle parts to use in their hybridization of their species
Sure.
because their species is dying or whatever, and they need genetic material.
Well, I think it's okay to say something like that if you couple it with it's a possibility.
Well, no. The one particular investigator researcher I'm talking about, does not couch it like that.
Right.
And I always say, well, if they wanted genetic material, they could sneak into a slaughterhouse and an abattoir and there's vats of the stuff.
Sure.
You can go in and get all the genetic material you need. You don't need to be
Yep,
sneaking
absolutely.
around in the pastures.
Yeah.
It's not the cow; it's where the cow is living.
I think you I mean, you must be close to 99% on that theory.
Oh,
You know, you have to be.
it's the least likely possibility
Yeah.
to me.
Yep. I think that
it's
makes.
come in light years to make lipinized stew or eat Rocky Mountain oysters. You know, I've had Rocky Mountain oysters; they're tasty, but I wouldn't travel across the galaxy to get them.
Oh no. Oh no. Yeah. Okay. So we're back to the magnetite. You found. Do you have any just slight theories on why the magnetite would be present? A landing?
Well, the biophysicist who did the study, he thinks that there is a correlation between UFO landing sites, crop circles, and cattle mutilations. That these weird magnetite concentrations and what appears to be evidence of a microwave-like event is common in all three of those particular scenarios. And he was working on a theory that perhaps some sort of plasma vortex is involved and that it's producing enough heat to melt the magnetite, but it's also producing a negative gravity environment within the torus of the event. So, you know, it's been years since I read his conclusions, but that's basically it in a nutshell. And my particular case stood out from, I don't know how many other cases, there was probably 30 or 40 in there. But the one that I did was, for some reason, just had the most noteworthy head scratchers. And it was really cool that I had Louis Theroux's Weird Weekends filming the whole thing.
So you also found a very weird substance once
Yeah.
that you actually mailed off. And
Yeah,
what-
I did.
You got to tell us that
Oh,
story.
yeah. That was my very first case. I was the guy that lost 49 head, Emilio Lobato, I talked about. I was at his house interviewing him. It was like my second interview that I'd ever done in this realm. And on the video, you can hear the phone ring, and Emilio picks up the phone and goes, "Yeah, he's still here. Okay, we'll be right over." And he hangs up the phone and goes, "That was my nephew." He said he just had a mutilation last night and wanted to know if you wanted to come over and check it out. And so, you know, we hauled ass over there, and unfortunately I had used up all my batteries during the interview with him. I had just enough to do about 5 minutes of shooting, which I did, and it was the strangest thing. There was this yellow kind of marmalade, oily, gelatinous kind of marmalade stuff. That was kind of transparent. You know, you could look into it. It
Okay.
wasn't opaque, and you could see little bubbles and stuff in it. And so I had a film container, and so we carefully scooped it up and put it in the film container. I wrapped the entire container several times with duct tape, and then signed my name on it, and had it, you know, spent a lot of money and had it couriered up to the hematologist, Dr. John Altshuler.
Okay.
And when he opened it up, he called me up that night and said, "Why did you send me an empty film container?" And I said, "It wasn't empty. There was this, I have video of me scooping the stuff up and putting it in the film container."
Gosh.
And he goes, "I tested that vial, and the only thing that's ever been in there is film."
God, that's nuts. What's your explanation? Theories.
Not sure. It's been found in other cases. It's pretty rare, but there's 3 or 4 other examples of people describing this yellow jelly-like material. I don't know. I don't
When
know
you
what
say
it is.
yellow, do you mean orangish yellow or true yellow?
True yellow. Yeah.
Did you ever do you ever bring black lights, UV light to
All
your
the time, yeah.
scenes? And what do you find?
I've never found fluorescent material on the backs of
Nothing.
cows. There were a guy named Howard Burgess who was helping New Mexico State Patrolman Gabe Valdez investigate cases on the Gomez Ranch in Dulce. They ran his herd through a chute, when it was after sunset, and shined ultraviolet and infrared lights down on the cattle, and I think the ultraviolet lights picked up what appeared to be like markings on the backs of the animals, like they'd been marked
Ahead of time?
to be spotted from the air.
Mm.
And I don't think any of them ended up being mutilated, but that's the only time I've ever heard of that sort of method of identification being proven. I've never found anything with a black light except mundane stuff like paint chips, and there are a few things that will fluoresce, but
Right.
nothing overt that looked
Do you-
like somebody had marked the cow.
Yeah, but you still bring it. Do you still bring it every time
Oh,
you
yeah. Oh,
go
yeah.
out and you bring
Absolutely.
it? Yeah.
That, and I bring well, what I would do is I would get to the site with the rancher, and he would point it out, and I'd tell him to stay in the truck, and I'd let my brother's Pyrenees dog out.
Okay.
And Cato, first thing he would do would be to scout the entire area and immediately pee on any vegetation or fence posts or whatever that a coyote had marked the territory. So I could instantly find out where the coyote sign was, because that's important, because coyotes are, Wile E. Coyote
Yeah.
is one of the chief culprits when an animal dies, and 2% of all cattle die every year. So, you're going to have natural deaths all the time. But Cato would be able to show me instantly where any coyotes had come, or if they had come close to the body at all. And then, if he would approach the body, it was one thing. If he wouldn't approach the body, then it was, it was noteworthy. And so I think because he could smell parts per trillion, he is a very, very useful, junior investigator. He would be the first one on the site all the time. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I'm probably the only person that ever used dogs in that manner. And I think it's something
interesting.
that, if anybody out there has the misfortune of being faced with a potential mutilation case, to bring your dog and let them out first.
Did you ever have your dog cower or act
Yeah.
bizarre?
Yeah. He wouldn't go near the calf that was in the snow.
Mm.
He wouldn't go near it. In fact, he wanted to get back in in my Jeep.
That's amazing. So what would your next step be? So the dog?
Mark out a crime scene, basically, with tape, and then establish a path in and out of the body so that no extraneous, footprints and scuff marks or whatever, were around the animal, because I wanted to go over it very carefully. I do a magnet drag on the cases where I was able to send samples somewhere. I would take plant and soil samples every 5 feet out to 50 feet, north, south, east, and west of the body, draw a diagram, and it takes a whole day to do it, basically. It's pretty involved. And then do a complete examination of the animal as best I can. especially on the jugular vein, look for needle marks if the animal appeared to be missing some blood or fluids, which generally they weren't. But I mean, that's something you hear all the time, that they're always drained of blood. They're not.
Right. Yep.
That's not true. I've even had ranchers say, "Oh yeah, look, obviously they drained it," and me and my brother would muscle the thing over and whoosh, all the gelatinous.
But have you found cattle that have been drained of blood?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that you
Yeah.
mean like we're talking
Yeah.
dry?
That calf had a single drop of blood that had stained its left rear hoof. That was it, in a 5-inch snowfall. Which
That's a tough one to get. It's a
yeah,
tough
oh,
one.
man. I'll tell you. They did a little portion of the footage of that calf. They did on the Tucker production.
So what about the actual numbers of cases? I mean, are we talking 100,000 since the 50s or
Yeah,
60s?
yeah.
100,000?
Officially, we've got 9 to 10,000 that were officially counted by Tom Adams and David Perkins, and this was back in the early 90s. That was the number. We figured it was about 10,000.
Okay.
I figure now only 1 in 10 are being reported. I
Oh,
think the higher strange the case is, the more freaky, the less likely it is for it to be reported.
does the government cover losses from predation? And this would be considered predation, I would imagine.
It's, people think, well, it's just a farmer, he's doing it to get insurance money. I don't think I've ever met a rancher that had insurance on his cattle.
Oh,
They
okay.
can't afford it. It's just
Right.
too expensive.
Right.
So, and that's not even. It's when you look at the deer and the elk and bison and some of the other animals that are taken, horses especially, they really, seeing a horse, cut up like that is really, really tough.
Is
And
there
then-
any indication that the animal struggled or was, in fear? I mean,
No, very, very rarely have I found that.
is that something you test for, Christopher?
Yeah.
Whether an animal was full of adrenaline or I wouldn't know.
Well, I look on the ground for thrashing, because usually they
Okay.
thrash their legs and they'll dig out a fan of material in a
Sure.
kind of a fan shaped, from their legs jerking around. That's pretty rare. In fact, this one horse case that I had, the horse is about 30 feet from its own tracks.
So it was dropped.
Yeah.
Dropped. Literally, it had to be dropped.
Yeah, I think that these animals are being picked up, taken somewhere, experimented on, and then dropped, usually in a different part of the pasture. Sometimes they mess up and drop them in the wrong pasture. We've had cases with 5 fence lines between where the animal was last seen and where it was found, mutilated,
So,
2
has
miles
there
away.
has there ever been any gas chromatograph stuff done with the flesh to see if there's any, some kind of anesthetic injected
Yeah.
into the?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they found everything from nicotines, anticoagulants, coagulants, various types of tranquilizers, ketamine. Horse
They found
tranquilizer.
ketamine.
Yeah.
So
they
ketamine
found,
has been found. Well, that's really interesting.
Sam Walton, the owner of Walmart, he had a case on his ranch in Benton, Arkansas, and they found mescaline in the cow. And there was also a makeshift, kind of a weird occult, black magic altar.
So
What
weird.
else did they found? They found anesthetics. They found animals that the copper had been taken somehow from the blood. Animals with way more copper than they should have. It's it's just every case is unique.
It sounds
its
like
own
there's
way.
very few consistencies other than the animals died in a weird way.
Yeah, and the organs that are missing, which happen to be the organs that people develop cancer in the most.
Right.
Besides the lungs.
Right.
Lungs are sometimes taken, but not often. But all the soft tissue organs are where we tend to develop cancer.
Okay.
Which I had an EMT point that out to me, and it's like, yeah, now that you mention it. You know?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. So, have you read or investigated though other like wild animals? Like somebody called you because there was 5 rabbits in their yard that had holes drilled through them, or I've even heard about dolphins that have been
Yeah, there were
found
50
mutilated.
in one case.
Yeah.
50 dolphins with identical cuts around their necks
Yeah.
were found washed up in France.
So weird.
Seals, big ocean-going seals with spiral cuts all the way down to the blubber.
Of course, the skeptics on that one said, "Oh, that was a propeller that did that."
No,
Yeah, of course not.
no. The propeller leaves lines like this.
Yeah.
It doesn't spiral down the whole body, and I mean maybe 1 in a million. But when you start finding these animals routinely like that, then you got to wonder.
But what goes through your head? I mean, you're brilliant, Christopher. I mean, I don't think anybody who would get to know you wouldn't think that you were a brilliant guy. What's going through your head when you're reading about those seals with those spiral cuts? I want to know what's going through your damn head.
I don't know. It keeps it interesting. For instance, I was writing the book, and I noticed that there was a wallaby, which is kind of a little miniature kangaroo,
Yeah.
in Australia, and there was one in the Portsmouth, England zoo, I think, or the Dartmouth Zoo, I forget, but it was in some zoo in the Midlands, and it was in a cage, and it was found mutilated, and it freaked them out. And then exactly 6 months later, a wallaby in the Jackson, Mississippi zoo was found mutilated.
In a zoo. In a zoo. Yeah.
In a cage, in a zoo. But what's up with that? Exactly.
So is that what's going through your mind? Okay, so here's this brilliant guy. He's been doing this forever. And so all that goes through your mind is, what the heck is with that? Because, I'm not blaming you for thinking that, but because it's confusing.
It's totally bizarre.
It's bizarre, okay.
This is not a field.
So I shouldn't feel bad personally when that's what I do. When I read stuff like that, I go, what the heck? That's all I can do.
The attrition rate in this field is way beyond any other paranormal pursuit. More people have either gone crazy, killed themselves, or just, disappeared.
Cattle mutilation investigators.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I could start ticking them off. The ones that have killed themselves, died, gone into real severe drug addiction. It just eats people up and spits them out. And
Okay.
David Perkins and I have been able to come up with a way to keep the subject matter at arm's length, and not take it on, not allow ourselves to be too freaked out about it. So we attempt to try to keep the whole thing as light as possible, and that's why I argued for years to not call them mutilations. It's just it's in my mind it's very off-putting. Who wants to know about a mutilation? But if you say an unexplained livestock death, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Then
But
not as
it's such an
threatening.
understatement, though. When you say unexplained livestock death, because they're like, Well, normally in an unexplained death, you don't have the eyes missing and the udders and the anus cord out. They have a lot of unexplained human deaths every day, and generally they're still in one piece.
There have been a number of human mutilations.
Yeah,
as
I was
well.
going to get to that.
Yeah.
And I've looked at some of that stuff, and it's actually horrific. But I always wondered, because it was just still photography, was I looking at a fake photo? What are your thoughts?
Well, Richard T. Hall in England has done a really good job researching that subject, and he's come up with some pretty interesting theories and some facts about a group within either the SAS or MI5 or whatever that is being dispatched to particular disappearance cases that they feel might be related to human mutilation, and he's been able to get some photographs from some cases, and it's yikes.
So are there cases that have not been publicized that you're aware of?
Yeah.
Oh, there have been.
Oh yeah.
A lot of them, or is it?
Well, Don Ecker, who he and his wife Vicky had UFO magazine. They started it, I think, in the late '80s. He worked for 3 years. I mean, this guy is I think he's a homicide detective in Philadelphia or some sort of law enforcement officer. And he had lots of connections within the law enforcement community. And he started looking into the mutilations, and he was told in no uncertain terms, don't go there. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for your family, for your career. Just leave it alone. And he tried for 3 years to get to the bottom of several cases that happened. I think one guy was found mutilated on top of a building in New Jersey, and he had salt water in his lungs. It's like just weird stuff. And,
yeah, that is weird. See, Alex, I don't want to interrupt. Just hang on 1 second. Somebody sent some photos, Alex. If you take a look, Galahad, look at the bottom of the comments there. Said he sent you an email. I think it relates to this.
The most
Yeah, I'm looking.
noteworthy one that if you've seen photographs of a human mutilation, chances are it's the what's it called, the reservoir.
It's a South American.
Yeah, the Guaraparanga reservoir case, which how do you take all the upper, the heart and the lungs out a quarter-sized hole in the crook of your elbow?
Yeah.
All his lungs and everything were taken out a small hole in the crook of his elbow.
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
And all his lower organs were taken out, his belly button.
Do you think there's a possibility of the connection, an alien connection to the missing people? So what are your thoughts on who's doing the human abduction mutilations?
Not
Well,
only
obviously
do
you
I
don't
not
know, but
I don't know, and I really stay away from that subject.
Yeah.
As much as I can. I found out about a teenager girl down in Silver City, New Mexico. It was supposedly a mutilation case. And even with my connections with the New York, or the New Mexico State Patrol, I had the door slammed in my face. They said, not only am I not going to answer your question, I'm going to tell you to not make any more phone calls about this. This is not, you have no need to know, and there's no reason for you to get involved in this. So, these are guys that
it sounds a little threatening. Threatening.
They definitely, I was being threatened. Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
So,
was there something, Alex, that we need to talk about from that?
Yeah,
comment?
I could put it up. Looks like it's from David Ellis about a possible mutilation.
AKA Galahad Whitley. Okay, go ahead.
So this is just what he wrote to me. Alex, I was called in on a possible cattle mutilation here in Whidbey Island in 2013.
Oh, no shit. my family had a summer house there.
When I got there, the cow had been buried by the rancher after veterinarians had examined the carcass. They had reportedly didn't know what mutilated the cow. The cow was alive 1 minute and found dead 10 minutes later. The pasture abutted numerous neighbors. The possibility anything could have killed the cow in broad daylight without being seen was minimal. I did walk around and found a few strange scratch marks on the ground and weird partial print in the cow pile.
So show us the photos.
Where in Whidbey Island?
Yeah. If you're listening,
David,
do you want to mention that in the comments, in the chat?
So what are we looking at here? That's a human footprint?
No.
It's a Bigfoot footprint? What are we looking at here?
So he did say, I found a few strange scratch marks on the ground and weird partial print in a cow pile. Let me go back to some of these other photos. So it looks like...
It's interesting. Look familiar, Christopher?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't.
And then there's...
Interesting. Well, of course, those may not even be related to the actual
They
case.
look pretty fresh. The cow pie didn't look that fresh, but these do. Did he say where on Whidbey Island?
South End.
South End. There
Yep.
we go.
All right, so that would be what, Mukilteo?
He said these marks were found in a straight line.
Huh.
Oh, they're almost like letters. Is that what you're hinting at, David? Almost like alphabet. It's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. You don't. That's kind of rare actually. You don't find any sort of potential, physical evidence like that, crime scene evidence in cases. That's unusual.
So, what are your thoughts on other cryptids? Just kind of getting to know you better. Have you ever heard any audio things or seen anything strange happen live while you've been investigating a case?
I had a run-in with a Bigfoot right at the bottom, the base of Mount Shasta.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty terrifying.
Yeah, well, tell us that story. Share it.
Well, my buddy and I had we were doing a photographic safari around North America. We did 28,000 miles in 6-8 months, and it was in April '79. We were sitting on I-5 looking at the sunset, and we saw a road that zigzagged its way all the way up to the base of Mount Shasta. So we figured out with a good local geodesic survey map how to find the road. And the next day in the morning we found the road and we started going up. And we were the first vehicle up there. It was early spring, and we actually had to dig through a snowbank to get to the end of the road. We got to the end of the road, and it was so weird. There was this big round rock that looked like a Flintstone's wheel. It had a hole in the middle, and it had the construction, the fluorescent orange construction tape that was wrapped around the hole, and then it went across the road and was tied to a twig on a tree, like it was a makeshift, don't go beyond this. And the only thing beyond was a cul-de-sac where you could turn around. And so we parked, and we didn't we just left it alone. And we parked, and then it was about a quarter mile of a hike up through the incredible, huge Douglas firs and Sitka spruce and western cedars, big, giant trees. And we broke through tree line, and we got up, and we were blocked by this impenetrable hedge of mountain madrona. This stuff was ancient, probably hundreds and hundreds of years old. It was about 6 foot high. You couldn't even stick your hand. It was so dense with all the twigs, and one little twig this big, you couldn't break it. And so we're wondering, we could see the mountain. It goes straight up, about 300 yards away. And so we're trying to figure out how to get around this. And then we noticed that one of these madrona or huckleberry, whatever the hell it was, there was one that was by itself, and all the leaves had been picked off, and it was something like brown that was smeared on the tips of the branches. And all of a sudden we smelled this awful smell, and I turned to my my friend and said, "Dude, you gotta check your drawers, man." And as soon as I said that, we heard this this really deep, guttural, questioning sound coming from inside, the hedge.
What?
And then it screamed, and it screamed so loud, I thought it broke my eardrums. I could hear the echo. There was like a foothill about 1.5 miles away, and I could hear the echo come back. And all of a sudden, boosh, boosh, boosh. This thing starts coming at us through the madrona. And I'll tell you, there was some ultrasonic low vibrations that literally shut my brain off. And I don't remember how I got down to the truck or the van. I don't remember half the trip down the 10 or 12 mile dirt road. The next thing I remember is I'm looking straight down a cliff. I'm in the passenger seat looking down a cliff as my buddy's four-wheel sliding around corners.
Oh, jeez.
And then I said, slow down. So, yeah, that.
So you don't know what it was, but you know what it wasn't.
I know what it was.
No, I know, but you didn't see it. But you know what it wasn't. It wasn't it wasn't an elk.
It wasn't a bear.
It wasn't a bear.
No. Too early for the bears.
But the fact you say it was so loud it almost broke your eardrums.
Yeah. And there was these super low ultrasonic frequencies that hit some sort of terror frequency that made me blank out. Wow. And I was operating completely on autopilot. I don't remember how I ran 1/4 mile and then drove 6 miles in a van. I have at the time I had no recollection of it. It was really freaky. Definitely.
So has that caused you to look into the mystery a little bit more?
Oh yeah. I grew up in Washington State, so my grandfather was involved in a Bigfoot event. He didn't see it, but he got there about an hour after they chased it away and saw the footprints everywhere. This Bigfoot had come out as an old silverback, had come out and started raiding this woman. She had a fish salting operation, and the Bigfoot started eating all the fish out of the barrels, and she fired a shotgun and chased it off. And then I forget, I think she may have just gotten a phone, or she sent somebody to town, to the sheriff, and my grandfather was at the sheriff's office, and he heard about it, and he raced out there with them and got to see the evidence behind. That was 1918 in Hoquiam, Washington.
1918?
Yeah, right near Aberdeen.
That's so cool. So, can you describe the scream that you heard, or whatever roar What animal would it be the closest to?
It sounded like the cross between a lion's roar, a giant train engine, and like a super guttural human voice in slow motion, so the pitch came way down.
Wow.
It was just, it was, you know, it was. I've never heard anything ever in any form have I heard that associated with a living creature. I've never,
Yeah.
you know.
Did it have a metallic-y, kind of slightly metallic-y
No.
sound to it? No, nothing
no,
metallic.
no.
Okay.
No.
So interesting.
And the ultrasonics, you know, it took me a long time to figure out why I blanked out, and the best explanation that I found was that the thing was playing with ultrasonics, and it hit a particular really low frequency. I'm not sure what it is. I think 17 cycles or something, and it's the flight, you know, to get the fuck out of there, get the hell out of Dodge, and it doesn't. You don't have a choice,
Right.
you know. And you know, now it would be different. I wouldn't. It wouldn't freak me out as much because I have seen things now and experienced things that I wouldn't know where to begin. The San Luis Valley in the 90s was just daily, day in, day out, stuff was happening. And I had a big network of sources in law enforcement, in the ranching community, in the farming community.
Did you ever meet anybody in law enforcement that was keen that this was not just predators? I mean, did you meet quite a few of those people?
Yeah, and cattle inspectors and brand inspectors, people who worked for the government in the managing of cattle, and veterinary pathologists. I mean, Dr. George Onett for the NIDS team, the National Institute for Discovery Science.
Bigelow.
Yeah, and Colm Kelleher, they published some very, very good papers, and then Colm went ahead and wrote a book called Brain Trust, where he lays out the whole history of prion disease and how it was probably weaponized by the Army Chemical Corps, and then escaped into the wild in the mid '60s from a biophysical lab in Fort Collins and one in southern Wyoming. And that's when the first cases of chronic wasting disease were detected in nature. And he pretty much lays out. He says, when there's mad cow cases, which you don't hear about, but the few times that we've had them, there have been mutilations that happen right after them. And he had charts and graphs and maps and everything. And the guy's he's a pretty well respected microbiologist. So he wrote this book, and it just died on the vine. Nobody bought it. And it's just too much.
Yeah.
But I tell you, man, I just devoured it. I applaud his courage to look into the subject, number one, and then to publish. I really applaud that. And I think NIDS, even though I was dogging them for the first 6 or 7 years, after I finally realized that they were publishing, they were actually trying to share some of their insights and their data. And so I buried the hatchet with them, and they brought me aboard as a field investigator. And I had all my vets in the valley, and they had all their protocols, and I had financing to do any testing and all that.
Well, you've had run-ins, even you've been even financed by some pretty big people.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
my
to help you
punch-
with your research.
Yeah, my punchline is, as soon as I got everything together with NIDS and got funding, I didn't have a mutilation case for 7 years.
Oh, jeez. That's crazy.
Yeah,
How many-
Lawrence Rockefeller funded me for 2 years.
yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Anything going on currently?
Yeah.
Is this happening today?
Yeah. We just had a case in Whidbey Highland.
So yeah, it's.
I mean,
it's
allegedly. I
Yeah.
would obviously have to, know more.
yeah.
The Oregon cases are the most recent. We've had cases in within the last 5 years in Georgia, north central Florida, southwestern Nebraska, Missouri. There was the very first case we've ever heard about from Alaska happened a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's 1 in 10 cases that are being reported. I think that most ranchers know that no good will come from reporting the case. They don't want to spend money on a lost investment.
Right.
They're not going to have veterinarian, doing autopsies or necropsies.
Yeah, that's not free.
Yeah,
What does it
yeah,
cost
yeah.
to do a necropsy on a cow? I would imagine that's quite expensive.
Yeah. I mean, you're paying hundreds of dollars. You're probably paying more than the worth of the cow.
Yeah.
So it's self-nullifying, if you will.
Yeah.
It's really ingenious the way the whole thing is set up. There's plausible deniability, and there's the fear factor, which and the plausible deniability and everything. And these guys, like saying that it's collective delusion. These guys don't know what they're looking at. Sure, maybe in a few cases, but we're talking. Some of these guys have been, they're 4th, 5th generation ranchers. They know cows, and they know animal husbandry, and some of them are their own vets, and a lot of them butcher beef, and some of them are taxidermists. They know what they're looking at, and to use a broad brush and say, oh, they're all delusional, then how come the cases stop? What, everybody stops being delusional?
Yeah.
It's the whole thing is really to me it's the most important. If we want to understand the paranormal, if we want to understand UFOs, we have to understand mutilations, and then once we understand mutilations, that will give us an insight into the UFO question. David Perkins thinks that it's a linchpin subject, that once we've reached the threshold of understanding, it's going to make our task of identifying and defining the UFO mystery that much easier. And we may be seeing Gaia as a superorganism may be performing some of these things in an effort to get us to go see the cosmos and get off the planet and spread Gaia's, her crown of her achievement, sending that genetic material out to spread amongst the stars. And this could possibly be some sort of collective manifestation that has to do with the health and vitality of the world, the planet. And we eventually got to get off the planet. The sun's going to go supernova. We're going to get hit by an asteroid. Something's going to happen, and we have to. Gaia may be trying to kick us out of the nest and tricking us with whatever she has to at her disposal. I really believe. I never use that word, but in this case I will. I never ever use the word believe, but in this case I truly believe that Gaia is sentient. That this planet is actually a superorganism, and it's part of a larger galactic intelligence, which is part of the 8,000 galaxies in our particular cluster, blah, blah, blah. So,
Well, if you think about it, Christopher, even a city, it becomes a superorganism after a while.
sure.
I mean, it has an endocrine system, it has an immune system, and the police or the immune system. It has the plumbing. And if you watch it on a high-speed camera, you look at a city, even you think, God, that thing's alive. It
And-
grows like an amoeba when you look at it
then,
from space,
and then look at the
like a wood tick.
Yeah, and look at the electronic age and the networks of
The nervous system.
electricity. Yeah, it's like a nervous system, exactly. Or like synapses in a brain.
And I'm just speaking of a city like a parasitic thing on Earth. If you go up high enough, you look at a city, it's like a wood tick. It doesn't look so good.
Well,
But even that becomes almost alive, almost a sentient being, a city does, let alone the Earth.
well,
Can you imagine all of the processes the Earth holds that we have no idea?
oh yeah.
Just imagine.
Yeah, we've licked the tip of the iceberg.
Oh my God,
I
yeah.
love that scene in the original Matrix movie when Agent Smith has captured Morbius, and he wipes the sweat off his brow and goes, "You humans, you're a virus. Everything you touch, you kill. You're
funny.
a virus." And
Well,
when you
well,
think
and that-
about
On that fun note, we're out of time, but yeah, we definitely, if you'd come back, Christopher, we'd love to talk about
Absolutely.
more on this topic. And do you have any last minute questions, Alex, before I kind of hogged everything because I'm like, shh, on this topic. I've been
I get
looking
them for
into
part
this.
2.
Okay, that sounds good.
But
Sounds
yeah,
good.
thanks again for coming on.
sure.
Yeah, it was a delight, Christopher.
All right.
Thanks, and thanks to the audience, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Call you up in the middle of the night. Been bothered by dreams, ain't feeling alright. You give me comfort, say just give it some time. By the end of our talk, I'm feeling just fine. You and I will always know where we belong. This ain't no ordinary love we got going on. I'll pick you up in my 59 Ford. We head on down the road until we get bored. Just you and me and the sun and the wind. If the rain should start falling, we'll head on home again. Everybody else can see where we belong. Oh, ain't no ordinary love we got going on. At the end of the world, together forever is one, and I'll wait. If ever you should be in doubt, and I'll pray they never can pull us apart, and I'll wait for the time when we'll be together every day. But I know if ever we'll be led astray, that I'll find my way back home to you again. At the end of the world, together forever is one, and I'll wait. If ever you should be in doubt, and I pray they never can pull us apart, and I'll wait. At the end of the world, together forever is one, and I'll wait. If ever you should be in doubt,